Welcome back, 412 Youth Middle Schoolers. We're so glad to have you back for another Wednesday night lesson. As always, we're going to start with our base scripture, which is 1 Timothy 4:12. And this is out of the New King James Version. It says, "Let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, in purity." So we've been talking about integrity the last couple of weeks, and integrity is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles or moral uprightness. Tonight, we're specifically going to talk about putting what is good and right above your personal goals and desires. And the example we're going to use is Joseph, and his story starts in Genesis chapter 37. So Joseph was the youngest of 12 sons of Jacob. He was Jacob's favorite, and the older brothers knew it. They grew to hate him because their father loved him more than the rest. One thing about Joseph, he had prophetic dreams as well. And in one of those, he saw a representation of his brothers actually bowing down to him. And when he told them about that, that made them not like him even more, and really more jealous after that. Even though they hated him, he was still eager and willing to help each and every one of them. One day, Jacob sent Joseph out to help them pasture the sheep. As he was approaching, his brothers planned to kill him. But one of them said, "Why should we shed any blood? Let's just throw him in this empty cistern, which is like a well, here in the wilderness. Then he'll die without our laying a hand on him." That's verse 22. So they took his coat, ripped it off of him, which is the coat of many colors. They threw him in the cistern, dipped his coat in goat's blood, and then sent it to their father to try to convince him that Joseph had been attacked by a wild animal instead. So after a while, some traders came by, and Joseph's brothers pulled him out of the well and ended up selling him for about 20 pieces of silver. And so those traders took him to Egypt, where he was sold again to Potiphar, who was the captain of the Egyptian palace guard.
And so through this whole ordeal, Joseph remained loyal to God and his beliefs. He didn't turn his back against God for allowing him to be taken from his family. He didn't grow to hate his brothers and think about how they wronged him. I mean, think about how easy that would be to sit there and think about what your brothers did to you. He didn't even have a bad attitude about any of this. In fact, he continued to do everything that he did in excellence as if it was unto the Lord. And the Lord was with him and blessed him in everything he did. In Genesis chapter 39, which continues the story of Joseph, in the verses 2-6 says, "The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master." Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. From the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. All the household affairs ran smoothly, and his crops and livestock flourished. So Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. With Joseph there, he didn't have to worry about a thing, except what kind of food to eat. And so Potiphar really came to rely on Joseph because of his loyalty, because of his faithfulness, because he did everything in excellence. He didn't dwell on the past. He didn't have a bad attitude about anything. Now remember, Joseph during this time, he's a slave. He literally has nothing to his name. He owns nothing. He has He doesn't have his family. He's in a foreign country. He has no rights to anything because he is a possession of Potiphar. So he has, I mean, that's a lot of reason to have like a bad attitude about some things, I would think. But he doesn't. He knows that his God is going to get him through whatever it is. He stays loyal to God. He knows that if he stays doing the right thing, which is, it doesn't matter what situation I'm in, it doesn't matter where I'm at, it doesn't matter what has happened, I still do everything in excellence, because everything I do, I'm doing unto God. I'm not doing unto a master. I'm not doing unto my brothers. I'm not doing unto anybody else. What I do, I'm doing unto God. So it's going to be in excellence. And God saw that. God saw that, and he rewarded him. He blessed him. And not only did he bless him, he blessed everything around him. And so after a while, Potiphar's wife started to really like Joseph. Joseph was very handsome, and she tried to cheat on her husband with Joseph. But he refused. He said to her, "My master trusts me with everything in his entire household. No one here has more authority than I do. He has held back nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God." So she's like, "Come on." And he said, "No, I can't. No, this is so wrong. I cannot do this. I'm not doing this. Not only is it against my master, who I trust, and he trusts me, and he's done so much for me, it's against God, and I'm not having any part of that." So one day she grabs him by the coat. She's not taking no for an answer. She grabs him by the coat, but he gets out of his coat and he runs away, and he leaves the coat with her. Well, that doesn't make her very happy. She is mad because he just denied her. He refused her. And so she tells everyone that he tried to mess with her, that he came to her and she screamed and made him run away. So obviously, when she tells her husband, Potiphar, that, he is absolutely furious, and he throws Joseph in prison.
Right. And so Joseph didn't even let that circumstance change his faith or outlook. He was nothing but loyal to Potiphar, and then he threw Joseph in prison. But Joseph didn't even hold a grudge against him because of that. He was in the lowest of low places, in the dungeons, serving a life sentence for something he never did. Yet he was still faithful to God and kind to others. So verse 21 says, "But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. The warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed."
Yeah, so can you see a pattern here? Something bad happens to Joseph. Joseph stays loyal to God and still does everything in excellence and in love. God rewards Joseph. Somebody does something to Joseph. Joseph stays loyal to himself and to God, and God rewards Joseph. I mean, he was in prison. He was first he was a slave. He had nothing. And then the slave was thrown in prison for something that he didn't do. But he still stays faithful. He still walks in integrity. God blesses him and makes him a favorite of the warden of the prison. So then he gives Joseph responsibilities, and he sets him in charge of things over the prison. So he just keeps the enemy keeps trying to put him in these terrible situations to knock him down and destroy his life, but he keeps rising to the top of every situation. He never stays down where circumstances are trying to put him. He keeps rising to the top because of his integrity, because of the way he conducts himself, because of his faithfulness to God.
Right. So years later, after this, Joseph interprets dreams for two other prisoners who were officials of the king and asks him to remember him when they go back to the king and tell him he's done nothing wrong. So he's trying to let people know, hey, what they're saying about me is not true. The officials forgot about Joseph when he got back until some years later when the king had a dream that couldn't be interpreted. The king then called for Joseph to help, and he told him what the dream meant. Joseph said, "It is beyond my power to do this," Joseph replied. "But God can tell you what it means and set you at ease."
So Joseph is not trying to take credit for this at this point. He very well could be like, yeah, absolutely, I can interpret this dream. Only I can interpret this dream. No, he said, I can't do this. I can't do what you're asking, but God can do it, and I'll let God work through me. He's still giving glory to God.
Right. So the dream that the king had was about 7 healthy cows grazing and 7 skinny cows coming up and eating them, but remaining skinny. And 7 full heads of grain on a stalk, and 7 shriveled heads of grain on another stalk. The shriveled ones swallowed up the full ones. So verse 25 says, Joseph responded, "Both of Pharaoh's dreams mean the same thing. God is telling Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 healthy heads of grain both represent 7 years of prosperity. The 7 thin, scrawny cows that came up later and the 7 thin heads of grain withered by the east wind represented 7 years of famine. Therefore, Pharaoh should find an intelligent and wise man and put him in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh should appoint supervisors over the land and let them collect 1/5 of all the crops during the 7 good years. Have them gather all the food produced in the good years that are just ahead and bring it to Pharaoh's storehouses. Store it away and guard it so there will be food in the cities. That way there will be enough to eat when the 7 years of famine come to the land of Egypt. Otherwise, this famine will destroy the land."
So, what do you guys think is going to happen? According to the pattern that we're seeing so far in Joseph's life, what do you think is going to happen to Joseph? He comes to the Pharaoh, the king, and tells him about this dream that there's going to be 7 years of prosperity and then 7 years of famine. So you need somebody to take care of your affairs during the 7 years of prosperity so you won't starve during the 7 years of famine. So I think you need to find somebody who's going to be able to take care of that. I mean, I think that the Pharaoh's going to put Joseph in charge of all of that. He was made a slave, and then in Potiphar's house, Potiphar put him in charge of everything. He was thrown in prison. The warden put him in charge of everything. So now the king is having dreams and needs somebody in charge of everything. I'm going to say that Joseph's probably the right guy for the job.
Let's find out. So verse 37 says, Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. So Pharaoh asked his officials, "Can we find anyone else like this man, so obviously filled with the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours."
See? Joseph was taken from prison and made ruler of Egypt, second only to the king himself. And it wasn't like Egypt was some little country that nobody knew about. This was like the reigning country over all of the known area. Like Egypt, they were the top dogs. And so Joseph went from literally being underneath the palace in the dungeons, living there for years, to second to the king. Like, he would have to be the king himself to be higher in higher rank. He was in charge of everyone in the entire country. And so Joseph, he just continued to show wisdom and faithfulness and integrity and grace while he was a slave, while he was in prison, and now as ruler of Egypt. All of these things, his conduct and the way he lived stayed the same. The circumstances of his life were constantly going up and down like this, but his integrity stayed the same the whole time. And so as he's the ruler of this, and he's in charge of who gets what amount of food, who gets what amount of everything. And so he just continues to walk in that integrity. And when the famine came to the land, like God showed Pharaoh that it would, the people from his own home country where he was taken from were going hungry. And his brothers, who tried to kill him and sold him into slavery in the first place, they came to Egypt to ask for food because they didn't have any food. And because of Joseph, the Egyptians were the only ones that had food stored up. So the people who started this whole thing in the first place are now coming to him, and he's the only one that could help them not starve to death. And just take a minute and think about, what would you do truly in that situation? If someone wronged you, I mean, like, seriously wronged you. It wasn't like they stole your pen and lied about it. Like, this was life and death situation for Joseph. And they attempted to just eradicate him. And he is now in charge of whether they live or die. Really think about how you would conduct yourself in that situation. And thank God that we have this example of Joseph, because he didn't send them away empty-handed. He didn't say, "Oh man, y'all really done it back then. Like, you shouldn't have messed with me. Now would you?" Like, no. He, in fact, at some point, he recognized them, but they didn't recognize him at first. And he didn't want them to know that he was their brother. And when he finally revealed himself, he gave to them generously. He gave them enough food to go back with. And then he even arranged for his whole family to come to Egypt and live with him so that they would have plenty of food. So he never held back anything so that he could get what he wanted, or what maybe it was best for him, because he could have, way back when he was a slave in Potiphar's house, he could have said, I can do this, but will you, if you give me my freedom, which would, for all the good that he did for Potiphar, would have been, good payment. but he didn't. And he could have said to the king, well, I'll interpret your dream if you let me get out of prison. But he didn't. He just did what he knew he was supposed to do. He didn't hold back so that he could get what he wanted. He lived a life of integrity, even though those around him didn't and actively sought to destroy his life. He always stayed steady with how he conducted himself and how he lived. And what an example of how to conduct ourselves in almost any situation, really.
Right. So that's going to wrap it up for tonight's lesson. We believe and trust you got something out of this. We enjoyed bringing it to you. So we love you. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.